That's all right. It is what it is. So. All right. Now, if today we can virtually get done with chapter 7, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you the test tomorrow, but I'm going to give you till Monday night to work on it. In other words, you will have lab tomorrow, lab Friday. We won't have lab on Monday, but you'll have till Monday midnight to get to finish it. I think that should be enough time for everybody. All right. Now, next week, then we're going to go over at least chapter 8 rather, and we may do 8 and 9. They're strongly related. All right. After we do 8 and 9, we'll have another test. Then we're going to do 10, 11, and 12, then have another test. There is a very, very, very good chance that after we get done with that, there'll be no more hands-on tests. Everything else we do will be written tests, or there'll be labs, or there'll be homework. All right. Plus, we got to put our project in there as well. All right. So with all that said, let me jump into chapter 7. Now, I mentioned this the other day, and I'm saying it again. What this chapter does is it takes a lot of material that was in earlier chapters and it kind of explodes it as far as it talks about it in much more depth and breadth of coverage than we did when we went over them before. In many ways, if you go back and look at chapter 2 and you look at chapter 4, there was a lot of do this, do this, do this, do this, and there wasn't a lot of explanation as to either what we were doing and or what was happening behind the scenes. That's what this chapter is about. So as it says, it's taking what was in chapters 2 and 4 and expanding the skills. All right. So what you'll notice in here, again, you've got to kind of look at it this way, everybody watching this. All right. And that is, in my opinion, at least, really, Muroc has no idea, whoever is using this book, they don't have any idea of how much C# background you actually. So basically, when they talk about inline conditional statements and inline loops, it's the same loops we ran back in the AWD1100 class, except we're using the @ sign and we're using a for each virtually all the time, and we're going through a database. Now, I know it's not the same thing, but what I mean is the logic is the same. All right. So as it says, we'll talk about how to use that Razor syntax for code blocks, inline loops, and even though we haven't done much of it, inline conditional statements. And with those, you can use either an if or a switch. Then we'll talk about, as it says, the essential skills for Razor views. All right. And then some more skills for Razor views. And finally, how to work with a model. Now, I found this to be the most interesting section of the chapter, the how to work with a model, because notice what the first thing there says, how to pass a model to a view. Technically, that breaks the rules. Technically, that breaks the rules of model view controller, which says really the model and the view should not directly communicate with one another. All right. Yes, we're going to break this, and we'll break it even more later when we get into chapters 10, 11, and 12. All right. Then we'll talk some more about Razor layouts. And finally, and I want to spend some time on this, if we just get that far today, if we do example 7.1 and we do it first thing tomorrow, then that's what we do. All right. I'll plan on going till around 3 o'clock. We'll take a break around 1. We'll take a break around 2. All right. Okay. So that's the plan. All right. As it says, the chapter begins with mixing code with HTML, our .cs HTML files. All right. So when we look in here, you know this already, that if you've got a block, that it goes in there like that. We've done this already, where we've set titles and the like. All right. On the other hand, if you've got something like a for each, and it's just one line, you do it like this. All right. So again, nothing really new there. That's what I'm saying. All right. Now, if you look at this, viewbag.customer name equal John. Okay, fine. And it says return views or return view. Okay, so what is that? Views, home, index.cshtml. That shouldn't be any surprise. We looked at this the other day where we had the about in there. All right. And when we tried to just put in the name of our port number, all right, or HTTP with port number /about, it didn't work. Whereas /index does. You know that it works like that because when you look at the routing pattern that's in program.cs, that is the default route that's set up. And if you want to be able to do that with the about, like you're supposed to do in the chapter 6 exercise, you either have to add attribute routing, where you add the decorators above that, or you have to go into the program.cs file and change it in there. So you have to do one or the other. All right. Now, I believe that what they're trying to show in this example here is, you'll notice since it's in a block, this is just straight C# code. There's really nothing in there that should be a big surprise. All right. But I believe if we were doing this, the if with the bracket, that part, I think we only need an @ before the if. All right. Just like we did it for the for each. All right. The example in here, I don't get exactly what they're trying to show, except notice @message. That's been set to welcome back, so you can see that. @viewbag.customer name, that was set, I don't even know. I guess to John, that was up here. So there it is with viewbag. And then finally, they're showing this, that if you actually want to do the math, that it should be within the, the @ sign. So this is actually doing, a C# addition operation. I think that's what they're trying to show here. All right. But again, I found this section when I read it, not so much confusing, but it's like, we already do that. We already do that. We already do that. The only difference again is they're trying to show you that since it is a .html file, that indeed when you are doing that, and when you are doing that, all right, inside of a .cs HTML file, you'll have to preface it, if it's a single line like that, with an @, and typically you'll take whatever you're working with and put it in curly braces. All right. Okay. So as it says, that's a code block. And then the other things were inline expressions that we were just looking at. So with loops, okay, notice that's a regular for loop. We've been using for each, which is really typically used a lot when you're working with databases. But there's nothing to say that you couldn't do an @for like they have here, an @while, or even an @do while. There's no reason to think you couldn't do that. All right, and it would work fine. So what they're doing here is they are populating this drop-down list with the numbers between 1 and 12. All right. And you notice here, for both the value and what they're showing, these are the same thing. All right, so that'll be the numbers 1 through 12 when you get done. All right. Then they've got another example here. As it says, this is a for each loop that displays a list of links. So just to show you that when you work with that in here, All right. So what are they doing? They're going through there, and with that at category, all right, they are going through their list of categories, and there are 3 in their example. So this guitar shop sells guitars, bass guitars, and drums. All right. But it's kind of neat knowing that you can come in here and do this kind of stuff. All right. So as it says, you can code inline loops within a view, and a lot of times that's the fastest way of doing things. All right. Inline conditionals, we've already seen one with that if, but here's another one. Again, correct me please if I'm wrong. You don't have to say anything if you agree. But if we remove that at sign, there's nothing in there you don't already know. All right. It's just, again, that if you're putting this inside of a view, meaning you're putting it inside of a .cs HTML file, you again must preface it with the at sign. I find it interesting that you must preface this, but that's the only line. In other words, you don't have to do the else if or the else. All right. And again, switch would work just as well. Okay. All right. And then they even show it down here that you can use that with Bootstrap classes. Okay. This is something you might want to take a look at as far as setting something to active, because again, remember that for the thing we just went over, well, we didn't, but we'll go over it again. For chapter 7, you'll have to show what class is the active class. All right. So they show you a couple ways that can be done in here. I don't know, it's always, it's a matter of opinion when you can write something in multiple ways. Because a lot of the first year people will ask me, well, which is better? And I go back to that old joke that people make. It's like, well, which one of your kids do you love the most? Type of thing. It's all a matter of opinion. The one that's better is the one that makes more sense to you. And well, they both do. Then use either of them. It really and truly doesn't matter if you're given 2 ways of doing the same thing. All right. So the starting folders and files for an app. You've seen this already. Now, if you look in here, all right, there is virtually, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. There is virtually nothing new in here. All right. But what we're going to be moving toward is what we want to have show on the screen to Joe Blow or Mary Blow that comes up into our website. If they're coming to our bike shop, we only want to show them the products page. And once we show them the products page, we want to give them the ability to take one or more of those products and put it in their shopping cart. That's what we want to move towards. Right now, considering we have technicians, we have customers, and we have incidents. Right now, we have no administration on this. Anybody can add, delete, or modify a product, add, delete, or modify a technician, add, delete, or modify a customer, add, delete, or modify an incident. We don't want that. So eventually, and it does not show it here, we're going to have in here another folder at the top that's going to be called area. And that area will have its own controller and its own views. Typically, it won't have its own models. It is possible, but typically it won't. That will handle the administrative function. The reason I'm mentioning that and the reason that that's important is if we go, for example, to our view start, if you look at our regular view start that we have now, it says layout. But what we'll have to do once we come in and make an area is we'll have to make our own layout for that area. So that we'll have our own view start in there, which will say we want to use the admin layout file. All right. And I'm just bringing this up because, again, this is what we're moving toward. We want to set this up to be really reminiscent of somebody going out to a website that sells bicycles and bike equipment. And they can go out there and they can purchase. Now, we go to the purchase as far as we let you put it in the shopping cart. We figure out your costs, and I don't think we'll have time to come in and try to use some Stripe or one of those where you can actually use a sandbox, or PayPal's got a sandbox where you could actually make them think that they bought something. We'll see if we get that far. We never have before, and I know Evan hasn't either. All right. But looking at the rest of it, okay, this is our guitar shop, home and product. Okay. Home has an index and about page. Product has a list, a details, and an update. That should look pretty familiar. All right, we've called ours add edit. There's no reason we couldn't have called it update. All right. And the models, okay, and the context file. Our layout file, our view imports, which basically just says, hey, we're going to use tag helpers if we want to. All right. And our view start, which we've already talked about. Then in our www root, we've got our own CSS file in there if we want to use that to override something that's been put into Bootstrap. We could. We've got the Bootstrap file in there. We've got our program.cs file that in which, again, we set up our dependency injection. That's that use SQL server. And we also set up in there our routing, or we can set our routing up in there. Plus, even though it's not shown here, all right, we've also got the app settings.json file where we set our context file. By now, that should have all been reviewed. There shouldn't be anything in there that surprises you. Now, the routing that they're putting in here, this is just the standard routing. Okay, so unless they're going to do something where they're going to add some attribute routing with the decorators, there's nothing new in there. All right, again, by convention, this is what you get when you build the product the way we've been building it. If you remember much earlier, like in week 2, I think it was, of the semester, we built that future value thing and we did it from scratch. Well, hopefully now you see that even though you can do it from scratch, it typically makes much more sense to choose the model view controller type. Okay. All right. How to code controllers that return views. Guess what? Again, this is stuff that you know. We've done a lot of this. A lot of times we've skinnied down our home controller so it does this. To say return view again means bring up that file. Go to the views folder, go to home, and find the index.cs HTML. All right. Now, one thing that you're going to learn, I don't think it's either in this chapter or it might be the next one. I don't remember. It is totally legit in here, all right, to put in a name. Now, that name can be the name of a different view. You can call a routine from a different view, all right, or you can call a routine, all right, from the same view or whatever. So there's different things you can put in there. So as it says in both cases, what a iAction result is it's a type of view result. All right. With the name, it expects that it's the current controller and then whatever view you want to call by default. Doesn't have to be, but normally it is that way. So in this example, as it says, we saw this kind of thing. So this would bring up list, even though we were at the home page, what this is doing. So basically what it's doing is whether you go to index or if you go to list, it should bring up the list.cs HTML page. All right. Again, a controller typically contains action methods that are mapped to the view files in the view folder. All right. How to create a default layout and enable tag helpers. Well, again, there's your default layout. And as I mentioned, what we're going to end up doing when we end up with an area where we put our admin functions in is it'll look just like this. All right. And it can still be called viewstart.cshtml because it'll be put into a different folder, not our main folder, but it will say layout equals admin underscore layout, or maybe it's underscore admin layout. I don't remember. All right. And this is the other line that's in here, which again, basically says that we can use any of our tag helpers. And the tag helpers basically are anything that starts with ASP dash. Those are our tag helpers. All right. How to add a razor view layout or one of these. I think you know this already. We've done it. You right mouse click, you choose add new item. There's different ways you can do it too. I've tried to use the same way of doing this all the time. And I've tried to, when we do this, I've tried to be very consistent. All right. And use the ways that I think are the most intuitive. All right, we will come in and add some of that when we bring in the admin area, and that might be in the next chapter. I don't remember. But I do believe at the end of this chapter, in the guitar thing, they might actually show some of the stuff. We'll see. All right. But again, take a quick look here, because this is the stuff that we've been doing all semester. As it says, to specify code you can share between multiple views. All right, you can add a razor layout to the views shared project. All right, within the razor layout, you can use view bank and you can use view data. In a later chapter, we're going to go into much more depth and breadth of coverage as far as the difference between those. All right, within the razor layout, as it says, render body is basically what it shows everything. It shows your content. You typically have a header, and that might be in a container, and you might put a heading or whatever in there, then the render body, then a footer at the bottom. All right. To specify a default layout, as it says, you add an underscore view start. You don't have to do those. If you go and you specify your project type as being MVC controller. All right. All right. So some of these tag helpers, we've already talked about these. All right. And I'll tell you something, and occasionally at least, I'll break my own rules. But I started to show you that yesterday, where I said to be consistent, even though it always will default to whatever controller you're in, you could put, I think we did that yesterday with product. Several times I said ASP-controller equal product, even though we didn't need to do that. All right. It depends on exactly how precise you want to be. All right. Okay. Then our action, basically, again, the method that you're going to call. And then finally, the last one. Now, notice this. This is that ASP route. And normally, what we've been using in there has been the ID of whatever we're working on. So product ID, customer ID, etc. All right. As it says, param name is the name of a parameter. If you specify a parameter name that exists in one of the routes, the app uses the parameter value as a segment. Why are we doing that? Because remember that inside of our startup file, what we put in there all the time is that optional ID that's on the end of our default route. And that's pretty much what this is corresponding to. All right. Now, they mention here as far as coding a link, and they show how to do it by putting in an absolute URL, and they show how you can do it. Well, actually, the first one isn't really an absolute. It's a relative URL. But putting in the URL, and then they show it again by using the tag helpers. The biggest advantage of using the tag helpers is if later you go in and you change this all around. So if you change it, you might have to make a change here, or you might not. All right. This is considered the cleaner way. This is one of those times when, yes, you do probably write a little bit more code, but it's considered to be much more self-documenting to use the ASP.NET tag helpers. All right. And as it says, it's considered best practice. All right. 3 views that use default and tag helpers. So if we look in here, we've got the home index, the product list, and the product details. Okay. So no surprise there, but again, as I mentioned, they have added the ASP dash controller in there. All right. It would work fine if you left all of those off where it says ASP controller dash controller equal product. It would still work. All right. Same thing. But in here, notice, why does this work? Because in here, the ID is a string. So to say Fender Stratocaster will work. All right. Again, other than that, I don't think there's a lot of new stuff in here. So as it says, these views use tag helpers to specify the controller class, the action method, and the route ID parameter for the anchor tags. Probably if I'd have been, a little bit more with it from the beginning, I would have just been including all the time. I would have been including the from the get-go, I would have been including ASP-controller equals with the name of the controller. All right. So it says to make it easier to visualize these 3, here it shows them and how they look in the browser. All right. This is for this guitar thing. So notice in here, we put it into a list group. That's why ours looks a little nicer. They didn't. So you can view everything. You can view guitars. You can view Stratocasters. Now, you might say, well, that isn't ours. It will be. What we will want to be able to do with our products eventually is when we show the view that we have right now for our bike shop, the view that we have that shows products and everything else, all that stuff, that will eventually become our admin view. And what we'll have in products is we'll have view all products like that, or all, or whatever, and then we'll have it broken down by category. So then maybe wheels, then accessories, then components, etc. That's what we want to work towards. All right. And then when you go and let's say you choose view wheels, then it'll have a listing on your next screen of all of those. And then there'll be an entry in there that will for each product. And you'll have like a display product. And when it displays it, what it will show you then, all right, when it displays it, what it will show you is the equivalent of like a picture of it. So the image, the name, price. All right. They're not showing that here, but they will at the end of the chapter. All right, it's 1. Let's take 10, and we'll pick it up on page 252. More skills with razor views. We'll pick it up at 110. I'll see you in 10 minutes. All right, it's 110. So the next thing, this is new, a little bit of it is at least, more tag helpers for generating URLs for links. And the first one they're talking about is what I've already mentioned, and that's an area tag. What you quite often do as the complexity of your ASP.NET app grows is you start to segment this out into different areas. For instance, if you had, let's say that you were making an ASP.NET e-commerce app, all right, you might have an area for admin. You might have another area that would handle, cart stuff or payment stuff or whatever. And it just depends. It's always up to the developer. All right. So as it says with admin, it says this accesses an area that allows admin users to manage a list of products available from the website. All right. This is different from the area for the regular end user. The regular end user basically can view products and add them to their carts. They cannot modify a product, for example. They're also not given access to the other stuff we've talked about in here, things like technicians, incidents, and customers. All right. So that's using the area. Second, as it says, if you've got a long page, you can use a fragment. All right, where you basically break up a page into smaller pages, and then kind of basically that. All right. Then they get into relative and absolute URLs. This is what I thought they were on the other page, but we'll talk about it right now. So when you look in here, the ASP dash area, all right, this is kind of neat. All right. And we will do that for admin. Now, one thing we may have done this at the beginning of the semester. I don't remember. But had we gone in when we created our project, be it the bike shop or be it the Sports Pro or something else, and when we went in, we could have specified that we wanted authorization, and a bunch of this stuff would have been created for us rather than us doing it by hand. All right. But they want you to learn to do it by hand in case you've got to add it to like an existing project. I believe that's what they're saying. So there's ASP-area to specify an area, ASP-fragment, as it says. You can specify a placeholder if you want to jump to someplace in a file, ASP host for the name of the server, and ASP protocol. Now, I'm kind of surprised that it defaults to HTTP instead of HTTPS. All right. Well, what it says here is if you want to make sure that you must redirect it, even if you specify HTTP. And all right. And then there's, again, by now, I believe that everybody watching this knows the difference between an absolute URL, which must start with either HTTP:// or HTTPS:// or FTP:// and that's an absolute, or a relative that's relative to where you currently are in the site. As mentioned there, relative URLs are much more flexible. All right. So you should use absolute URLs only when you're basically linking to something that's outside of your particular app. All right. All right, formatting numbers. Again, I found this. We've gone through this stuff already back in the AWD 1100 class. Currency, number, percent, etc. All right. I don't think there's anything that's new there. All right. And they give an example. Okay. So as mentioned here, in a razor expression, you can use these format specifiers. By default, they return 2 decimal places. If you were doing something scientific, you might want to return more than 2, or you might, if you're working with just whole numbers, you might want to return 0. Notice as it says, if necessary, they will round numbers to the nearest decimal place. All right. And it says search the internet. Well, if you go out to, the learnmicrosoft.com, you can find all these. We've dealt with many of them. The ones that you're going to use most often are the ones we've already dealt with. All right. Now we're going to kind of shift gears here. And as it says, how to work with a model. So far, as it says, the chapter has shown how to work with views. All right. However, when using the MVC pattern, the controller typically stores the data for the view in a model and binds that model to a view. All right. Well, it's stuff we have actually been doing. But again, they're now talking about it in a little more depth and breadth of coverage as far as what's happening. I also want to mention right here, and I think we've said this before, but I'll say it again anyway, and that is what we have been doing all semester in here, is we have been creating what are called code first applications, where we code our classes, our models, which are our classes. All right. We come in with a new get package manager and we add the Microsoft.entity framework core.tools and the Microsoft.entity framework core.sql server. All right. We come in and we add our context file. We modify our startup file to include dependency injection. We modify our app settings.json file. Then we go back again into the NuGet package manager, but this time into the console. We do our add migration and we do our update database. The reason I mention that is there is another way you can write this as well. There's actually two other ways. Rather than doing it code first, like we've been doing it, you can do it database first, where you write your database and then run it through a lot of the same kinds of stuff and have it build for you, all right, the model classes. There's also another way that I find really, really difficult. We used to teach it in here, but it was a cluster. And that is you can have the system generate what are called diagrams for you. And based off of those diagrams, you can use those diagrams to help you create both your database and your classes. Doesn't typically work real well, at least from what I've found. All right. So it says figure 712 begins by showing a C# class that defines a product object that can be used as a model. Well, this should look very similar to what we've been doing. All right. Nothing new in there, really, when you think about it. Again, notice that they've got product ID and they've got category ID. So the product ID, of course, is our primary key. The category ID is our foreign key. The code and the name, as they're both strings, we are initializing both to string.empty. All right. Then we've got our decimal price, our slug, which we don't think we have to go over anymore, and then our navigation property. So really, when you look in here, there's not a whole heck of a lot of new. And I think that for the other model in here, the category model, I think it's just category ID and category name, if I remember right. All right. In fact, it might be here. There we go. That's it. And we're taking the name and setting it equal to string.empty. So the point is this. There shouldn't be anything that we just went over in there that was new. All right. And they mentioned there's different ways that you can do this. But again, typically because of the fact that we want to combine information from multiple tables, we're going to do it the way that it's shown right here. All right. So as it says, you can do a view model, or you can do a view name model. All right, as it says, if you give a specified name, and I think they show examples. So by now, what's a model? It's just a class, right? It's a class that maps, once we go in all right, and we run our update database method, basically, or that update method, it's a class that maps to a table, all right? In a controller, as it says, you can use the view method to pass a model object to a view. Then the object, the action method, can return the view result object. All right. So if we look at the examples in here, again, we've done this. If you remember, we had, and this is an add edit really, because what are we returning here? It's add, but we're calling up just like we called add edit. All right. If we just had it called update instead of add edit, it would be the same thing. All right. So we have looked at doing this already, is what I'm saying. All right. Next, how to display model properties in a view. All right. As it says, that using directive that's in there, this I found again interesting. All right. They try to explain in here, and we're going to go back in just a second, the difference between at model lowercase and at model uppercase. In a nutshell, the difference between them is if you're referring to the model at the top of the program, all right, like this, with an at model, then you use the lowercase. In a using, you use the uppercase. And when you're referring to the elements that are in here, again, you use the uppercase. So they do go through this in here. You might find it helpful. You might find it confusing. I don't know. But let's see. Again, at the beginning of the view, you use the at model directive to identify the class for the model. So far, this has been for us. For example, for product, we've either said at model product or at model list product in brackets. If we're returning one, it's product. If we're returning multiple, like with a list view, it's been a list. All right. And as it says, by doing that, it binds, I should say, the product model to the view. After that, as it says, you use the built-in model property, which is the uppercase one. All right. Now, this is where I found it confusing. You might like the way they're saying it. I just found their verbiage confusing. It says to help remember the correct capitalization, remember that a property typically begins with an uppercase letter. So if you're using properties, it'll be model uppercase. All right. If it's a directive, like at model at the top of the program, it usually begins with a lowercase letter. Now, that said, I don't agree with this because usually what you have at the beginning of your program, I'm hoping this is going to change pages, come on, is something like this, and it's capital. All right. That's why, like I said, I found what they said confusing. So at model with a little m is a directive. At model with a big M is working with properties. All right. I don't know if that helps, hurts, or whatever. All right. All right. How to bind model properties to HTML elements. Again, if we take a look at this. All right. By now, you should understand what the ASP4 is doing in both of those. For the label, basically, again, setting it up, it is binding that label to that property. And I believe, just like it does in HTML, I believe if you click on the label, that it'll take the mouse and put it inside of the text box or whatever it is you're using. All right. Now, what is a little different are these hidden fields. Now, let's see. I thought they said something about them in here, but maybe I'm wrong. This is what I just mentioned about the helper with this stuff. Well, the only other thing that they mentioned in here, and I don't know if they even have it. One thing to notice in here, all right, they don't have any examples, but we did in the past, and that is these are actual properties. So there's a name property, there's a price property, etc. But if you're working with something for which it's calculated or you don't have a property, then this won't be an ASP4. This will be just a typical label, and this won't be an input with an ASP4. This will be an input with a type equal text, typically. All right. So you should be able to look at that and be able to map this up yourselves. All right, here's the one I just mentioned. So type equal text, ID equal price, name equal price, etc. All right. Okay. How to bind a list of items. We've looked at this already. We've written this. This is probably the one that causes the most confusion for people. All right. So what are we doing? Well, we're coming in here and first, again, binding both the label and this select statement to the category ID. Remember, when you work with a drop-down list like this, there are two components. There is the component you see, and there is the component you do not see. So even though we're showing in here guitars, basses, and drums, that's if that is put in if that field is put in as an int for that category ID, all right, then it's going to be 1, 2, and 3. If it's put in as a string, it might still be guitars, basses, and drums. So it just depends on which way it's set up. All right. Now, another thing that's in here, where is it? Is they talk a little bit in here about the to list. All right. And the reason that that is important is, again, look at it this way, that the to list that they show on the page here, I think they did at least. No, I thought they did. But the to list, let's just bring it up anyway. All right, there it is, right there. It's kind of like your database is one language and C# is another language. And you want to make sure that you're able to communicate between the two. And that's pretty much what the to list does. All right. Now look at the second example that's in there. Product equals context dot products dot find ID question mark new product. All right. That is a null coalescing operator, that double question mark. And what it's saying is, if you can find a product with that ID, all right, it's an existing product. Otherwise, it's a new product. So you're either going to be returning there with that return view product, you're going to either be returning a view that is filled in because you found the ID, or you're going to be returning a view like with an empty form. So a filled in form or an empty form. All right. Then again, to bind this, we talked about this before, and it's really important. This one's a little bit different, but with the ones that we have been doing, all right, where we've been saying stuff like you set it equal to 0 and you say something like, select a category or whatever. Those are all equating. So that 0, which is like select a category or whatever it is, those are equating, that number is equating to an ID for the category or whatever it is. That's why, again, when you've got a thing in here that says select a category or whatever, and you don't select one, if it still is on select a category, then the category ID is 0, which in the mind of the database means you didn't select the category, and that's why you get that error message. Now, what they're doing in here, and we did this once, is they are literally building, they are building this select element or this select list on the fly. What's the difference? Well, notice it doesn't have anything in there that says select a category. All right. So it's just building the select list by going out to the view bag, and it's assuming in the view bag we've already set up the categories through some kind of a query. And category ID is what's going to be stored, and name is what's going to be shown. All right. Again, I'm hoping when I'm saying this stuff that if something doesn't make sense, that you'll ask. All right. And if somebody else is watching this on tape and something doesn't make sense, that you'll ask. All right. And as they say there in this figure, the context variable is that DB context object that we've been using basically throughout the last several weeks. All right. How to display a list of model objects? Well, you've already seen this, but all right, typically at the top, then it's going to be list at model. So if it's at model product, you can count on it being either an add, a delete, or a modify. In fact, I think for a delete, you probably don't even put anything in there. I don't think we did. All right, but if it's going to be the equivalent in CRUD, if it's going to be the equivalent of a read where you want to read everything, then in our case, it'll be a list of something. All right. And we did, you may or may not remember, but we did talk about lists. We talked about lists in the AWD1100 class. The advantage of using a list, all right, is it can be more generic in nature. You don't want to typically use an array list. We're not dealing with arrays in here. All right. So here they're coming in as it says. They're initializing it. So we do have a list of products that's called products, but there's nothing in it. All right. So why are we saying that? Notice if the ID, so this is assuming here that the ID that's being passed in is a string and it defaults to all. So if you either passed in nothing or if you passed in the word all, it's going to run this and find everything. So go through, find all the products and list them out. Otherwise, all right, notice what we're doing is we're running a where, and we're looking to see if the category name is equal to the ID that we passed in, and we're listing it out. So that'll give us an individual one as opposed to all of them. All right. And again, I don't know if this is helping. I'm hoping that it is. I hate to be the kind of instructor that sits and reads a lot out of a book to you. I think I've mentioned this to you guys already. We've got a lot of meetings at Rankin where the higher up typically they get in administration, the more they love to read PowerPoints to you. All right. So in here, what are we doing? We are iterating through product. So we're iterating through our list of products. This is a name we're creating on the fly. This allows us to grab all of the different properties is the at model. So what is this going to do? Well, it's going to list for us every product's name, every product's price. If we didn't format it, it would probably look a lot uglier. All right. Every product's ID and every product's, well, let's see in here. All right. These are empty, meaning that that's going to allow us to do these, the view and the update. All right, by product or product ID. This is what we want to move towards. All right, if not on this test, then on the next test. We will want to be able to set up an area, move virtually everything that we're doing right now for product, technician, all the stuff that we're doing for technician, all the stuff we're doing for incident, all the stuff we're doing for customer, and all the stuff we're doing for product, except read. All right. everything. We want to move to an area. All right. And then when we bring up individual products, we'll want something like this. View is going to be a read-only view. Now, we will give the user whether they choose view or whether they choose update. In fact, they won't even have the update. All right. But unless we put in like an update where it has how many they bought and we let them change it. I don't know. But in here, in both these cases, typically what we'll want to do is actually show a picture of the actual product in question. All right. Then we're up to how to work with Razor layouts. Says so far, everything that we've been doing have been basically using all of the defaults. However, as it says, as your app becomes more complex, you can have multiple Razor layouts. If you remember, as an example here, if we go back and we look at this, all right, our layout was responsible for this. Virtually everything else we put in here, all right, was the result of a view. All right, so this was the underscore layout.cshtml. These were our product.sh, the different product views or the different, in this case, the different technician views, etc. All right. Chapter 2, you learn how to add a Razor layout. Okay, again, we don't have to worry about that unless we are creating multiple layouts because that stuff will be set up for us. Now, in the example that they're showing here, notice what they have. They are assuming that you are creating an area. All right. And you can put all of this different stuff that's shown here in your area. And you'll notice if you look right down at the bottom of the screen here, the layout is now moving or showing the underscore layout.cshtml, but it could show something else. So in other words, there could be an admin in there if this was an admin area. Now, much earlier in the semester, they were using another tag helper in here that they've gotten rid of, and now they're going to bring it back. That is the one that's shown here. That is the area name attribute. All right. The reason I'm telling you that is earlier in the semester, if you go back and look at a couple of the programs we did earlier, we said area hyphen name equals double quote, which means we didn't have any areas. All right. But let's look at what they say in here. It says the code, let's see. The second example shows the code as it says in the view start that sets the layout property. The third shows you how you can override it. This, I don't think, is going to make a boatload of sense until we're actually in there doing it. All right. By now, and we've mentioned this before, notice what's in here. This is the typical way something is laid out. I've been taking usually in the head section and putting that in a container. It's not that you have to do that. Putting something in a container basically is sending a message to Bootstrap that we may want to do some special formatting or may not. All right. So we put our title in there, and as it shows, all right, in your head section there, you can come in and put in, oh, you typically will, you put in your style sheet. Sometimes in the footer down here, underneath that, sometimes under the footer, you'll add your different script files. Sometimes you'll put them up here. I think it makes more sense to put them up here. All right. So then we come in our header. Again, typically in here, what are we going to have? All right. Whatever we want to set up in a header. Our main content will go in our render body, and then our footer will hold the name of the company or a copyright or a year or some combination of all that stuff. But again, as they mention here, a project can contain multiple Razor layouts. we're not really doing anything, or at least we haven't so far, that is so tricky and so complex that you need to worry about this. All right. Now, they do mention here, and this is kind of an important point. It says if you look at a couple of the things that examples that they've shown in here, there's duplicate code. It says they both use the same head element, and it says in some cases duplication is fine, but it's considered good practice to try principle. Do not repeat yourself. So as they say here, when you work with layouts, you can avoid code duplication by nesting one layout within another layout. And they show you an example of this on page 271. All right, so here's our main layout. All right. Now, do you have to do it like this? No. All right. But this is the main layout file. So by putting this in here, then adding it here, what's it going to do? It's going to replace this with everything that's in here. So this is the product layout file. So if you had another one for something else, you could do the same thing. That's all they're saying. Now, again, you'll notice in here, as I mentioned before, it doesn't look very nice. All right. It's functional. I guess that's what matters more than anything else. All right. Now, I don't think we've dealt with this before, but it says the view context property is available to all of your views and all of your layouts. A layout can use this property to get data about the context of the current view. As example there, its route. So you can get information, programmatic information by using this. And I think they give you a couple of examples right here. So again, if this worked, do this, otherwise empty string type of an idea. If your page is the index, make that active. All right. If it's product, make that active. If it's about, make that active. Otherwise, do nothing. And that should look familiar with the about in that example. All right. Because that is what you are supposed to do in chapter 7. Okay. That is what you're supposed to do for your, I believe it's for the case study, is something like this. All right. So you might want to dog ear that page, 275. Sections. Okay. So far, we've been doing everything in our render body. But if that gets too big, as it says, a render section is similar to a render body, but you can put in pre-done content from a section into a body. All right, what do I mean? Again, look in here. So if we had with this script section, all right, we could sit there and combine that. So this right here, okay, as an example, this is writing it once and then bringing it in to the program on an as needed basis. All these are much of this chapter. You probably have noticed this already. This chapter has basically done two things. It's explained a lot of what we've been doing that really wasn't explained before, and it showed a lot of shortcuts. All right. To me, that's the majority of this chapter. So as mentioned here, within a layout, you can use a render section to specify where content can be inserted into a layout. A section is just a block of content with a name. All right. And it's interesting because in a way, it's not really this, but in a way, back in the day, I mean, when I was first learning how to code, almost everybody who coded used BASIC, GW BASIC or BASIC, the same kind of thing. The point is, at that time, the language was very unsophisticated. And what you ended up doing typically was a lot of go-to statements, where you moved around and you moved from here to there by telling it to go to someplace. And you took that go to, you gave it a label, and boom, you jumped there. It's not exactly the same, but when I read this, that's kind of what I thought of. All right. That what you're doing is you're basically giving a section of code that you want to be able to jump to from other sections of the code. All right. All right. So unfortunately, they only spent about 2 pages on this. All right. They'll show you some pictures, but I want to spend a little bit of time looking at this. So, as mentioned, it says this chapter ends by showing the user interface for a guitar shop website that's included with the download for the book. All right. It says the best way to study this app is to open it in Visual Studio. We're going to do that momentarily. All right. Run it and see how it works. To help you understand the code, it says these files have more comments than what they typically put in. In addition, the exercise at the end of the chapter guides the code and modifying it to make improvements. All right. So the next figure, as it says, shows 2 pages of the user interface that's available to end users or customers. Again, this is what we want to move towards. So notice what you have here. So what we want to do with ours, what we want to do with what we're working on is basically a couple of things. Okay, really 3 things, I guess, that we're going to want to do, at least 3 for our next test. I don't think we do in our bike shop. So we'll want to go in and add, make changes as necessary to our underscore layout.cs HTML file to bring that up. Number 2, we're going to want to move everything for all the stuff we've been working on. All right. And it's not a bad time to do this because right now product's the only thing that we're working with. All right. We still, we have the other ones, and I'm going to have to give you the code, etc. for that, or the seed data. But we'll have employees, we'll have orders, we'll have order details, we'll have vendors. All right. At least those 4, and there might even be more that something I'm missing. But all of that stuff, we will want to go into an admin area. Plus, we'll want to set up something like this, where with I think we had, I don't know if it was 5 or 6 categories. I think it was 6. So again, this would be all then wheels, components, etc., all the way down. All right. And the idea is when you choose one of these, when you choose all, you should get everything. When you choose bases, you should get just the bases, guitars, just the guitars, etc. But for like this, when they've got guitars, the idea is if you choose Fender Stratocaster, you can see the details that you get. All right, you get the name, you get the price. We're not going to have a discount percent. All right, but you get the picture. All right, which would they make this much nicer if somebody actually wanted to order. But notice, all right, that the product details page that's here, for now at least, when we click add to cart, literally all it's going to do is it's going to return a message to us that says that the product has been added to a cart. It's not really going to handle it. We will talk about actually creating a cart later and being able to put products in there, calculate totals, etc., as we go on in here. All right. So this is the page then that administrators see. So notice what you have in here. It looks somewhat similar to what we've done before, but you've got your update and your delete, and then down on the where is it? Well, normally there it is. There's your ad. So there's your products. And if you do click update, as it says. So this is very similar to we have already done. All right, but we're again moving it in so that it is going to be in an admin type of area. In fact, if you look up here, admin product list. admin product delete, all right, with the ID of the number we want to delete. And that's it. All right. So with that said, let's take a look and see what's at the end of this chapter. All right. So it says modify the Guitar Shop website. So let's start by opening it and running it and see what it looks like. All right. So this is the completed one. This is not the start one. This is the completed one. So let's take a look at what's in here when we run it. So when you look in here, notice we have a folder called areas. And if I open that up, it's got a subfolder in it called admin. And if I open that up, it's got its own controllers and it's got its own views. It does not have a models folder. It will use everything that's in here. All right. And if we look in our controller, you can notice we've got a category controller, a home controller, and a product controller. And if we go into views, we'll have those three folders. All right, category, home, and product. Plus we have our own shared folder. If we open up the view start again, that says use the admin layout. What is the admin layout? Well, if we go under shared here, there is underscore admin layout. All right, because again, we would want to make sure that we would give a different picture. We would give a different picture to administrators as opposed to what we are giving to a quote typical user. Now, as we do this, all right, if you take, let's just run this. So I'm going to show you something here. It's taking that long, but it is. It says it's running. Here it comes. All right. So if you look over here, we've got this, and it says admin. Should make sense. You click there. Notice you've got manage categories. And when we click that, it will bring those up eventually. All right. Unless we're told to add that, I don't remember. And manage products. There's a big if though, or a big point. And that is right now, we're not requiring an administrator to log in. All right. There's no login functionality. We add that later. Also, anyone who wants to come in to home here, all right, and wants to go to products, let's say, or whatever, if they want to buy something, typically you'd make them log in as well. All right. And what you're going to notice when we go through this later, I don't know what's going on with that, but what you're going to notice when we go into this in more depth and breadth of coverage later is when you go to login, you're going to have two things in there. You're going to have login if the person wants to log in, meaning they've already got an account and will have a register. All right. And if they register, it's up to us. After they've registered, we can push them back to the login page, or we can just let them write in. All right, but even with that, we're not really going to do a whole heck of a lot. Don't know what the problem is there. Oh, I don't have a guitar shop. That's the problem. All right, so let's see if I can get that. I'm going to stop here and bring up my package manager console. Let's double check first. I don't know what that is. I do not have, oh, it says guitar shop. I'm going to remove that and try to recreate it. So yeah, unable to. So let's see. I have a migration in here. I may have to go back in and do it that way. So let's see if that'll work. So tools. We'll go to package manager console, and I'm going to try to remove the migration. You'll notice there's several of them. All right. And I think it just removed the last one that was in there. So I'm going to try to remove migration. And I believe this will remove everything, including the snapshot and the folder itself and the actual create guitar shop one that's in there. All right, so there's just an empty migrations folder in there right now. All right, the other thing I want to check, and it should be there, is I'm going to go into Tools, NuGet Package Manager, Manage NuGet Packages, and I'm going to go and look in my installed. They tend to install some stuff that I don't think you need. I've never installed anything in there except the stuff I've shown you, the tools and the SQL server. All right. But they like I said, they put in more stuff that I have never used. Okay, let's see now if we come in here and try this. What I really should have done before doing this was to go over all the things that are in the end of chapter exercise to make sure. We may end up having to remove a migration again. I don't think we will, but we might. And this, I know this is not a big database, so I don't know why my system today is so slow. I have absolutely no idea. All right, it took that. So let's update database. See if it takes that. All right, break this down and then run it. And you'll notice, like I said, if we go here, we can do the administrative functions, all right? But we don't have to log in. If we go here to view the add to cart, that's saying it really isn't adding it to a cart. It's just letting you know, basically, letting you know that. And the about, all right. Well, a couple things. First of all, the about is fine right there, but I'm going to stop the run. And I want to come over here and look at a couple things, starting with, I'm going to go into this startup file here, and you'll notice, okay, what have they done in here? They've got an area in here, and then they've got our default area in here. All right. Remember that you have to put the most generic one last. So in there, naming it admin makes sense because that's what the area was named. And the pattern is just it's the same as the other one, but we are prefacing it with admin and it does not have a slug. All right. Plus, if we go out now, so related, but just semi-related. If I go out to let's see, I'm going to go out to my regular views. These are not my admin, my regular views, and I'm going to go to home, and I'm going to go to about, and there's that about stuff. And if I go out here and I look at the my controller, and I go to my home controller, all right. What is it? What is important about that by putting that route action in there? Again, you may or may not have noticed this, but when I run the program now, oh, according to this, it's still running. Let me stop it and start it again. All right. I can now go to right here. I can go to /about, and it gives us the about. And it does that. It allows that to happen because we've got this here. If we left this out, so if I comment this out, oh, well, let's see. Is that going to be a //? Yeah. If I comment that out, the program's still going to run. But now, after we do that, and it eventually comes up, what you're going to notice is we won't be able to go right to about. We'll have to go to /home/about. So that's what this attribute routing has put in here. All right. So again, if I just go right now, all right, that works. But notice it's home about. If I come in here, though, before I just did this and it worked. Now it doesn't. Technically, it's not found anymore. The reason I'm telling you that is I just gave you the answer for your chapter 6 case study as far as what you have to do. All right. So I'm going to uncomment that. All right. And again, when we come in here now, why that's doing that now, but it is. Oh, I think it's because it was running. So let's. I showed you this in the book, but I just wanted to show it to you here. And that is, come on, here we go. If I view our products, notice how this changed. there's a view details and an add to cart. If you view the details, it's now showing you a picture. All right. And there's a little bit of tweaking that you have to do. I mean, when I did mine last time to try to get the stuff for the bike shop in there, the pictures typically were like coming out over here or whatever. So you might have to play with that stuff a little bit. All right, but let's take a look at what they have in here. I'm not going to go through it in much detail, but I'd like to walk through what they're doing in the exercise. All right. All right, so open it, run it. Yeah. Click the about link. As it says, it should display some stuff. Click the products link. We did that. As it says, if you get an error message that says cannot open database, then create it. Well, you already saw that. The left column, as it says, has all. It has guitars, it has basses, and it has drums. My goal is for you to be able to do the same thing on the bike shop. So again, on the bike shop, I don't remember what we had. Like I said, I know we had wheels, we had components, we had accessories, we had clothing. I think there was car racks, and there might have been an other or something like that. And then we'll have an all. That's what I want you to have for the test. And as it says, clicking on any of these, all right, and then you will get the items for just that category. Clicking on all, you'll get everything. All right. Then open the home controller in the home controller class, rather. All right. As it says, notice that there's a slash about, but not a slash home about. All right. So view the code. Yeah. Open the product controller and the corresponding product list. All right. As it said in there, well, in that area, basically, we just wanted to make sure we added the attribute routing. Now, number 9, in the product controller class and the corresponding product list, view file, open them. Make sure to open the files in the main area and not the ones in the admin area. All right. This is another thing to keep in mind. If we look at what we have in here, because I think at least, agree or disagree, it can get at least somewhat confusing. All right. And what I mean is, if we look at what we have here, here we're in the admin area. And notice we've got a category controller, a home controller, and a product controller. Here is our quote regular controller area. All right. And you'll notice category, home, and product. But you've got to look at it that this one is from the point of view of the end user. So it's what you want to show him or her. This is from the point of view of an administrator and what you want to show him or her. All right. And they step you through the whole program. I mean, we can go through it. That's not what's important here. But I think it's going to be worth your time to go through it and see how this is set up. All right. Now, when you go through and do this, and I don't know, I'm going to go back. I have not written the test yet. I keep upgrading and updating the test all the time. Maybe I won't have you do anything on this test except make sure that I give you the seed data for the other tables, create the other tables, and make all of them work as well. Because that's pretty much work when you think about it. But if we do that, we won't have an admin area. All right. And that's important. So we may do it one way, we may do it the other way. And I'm hoping what I'm saying makes at least some sense. All right. So what I'd like you to do is to go look through this. All right. Maybe it would help. I have not gone through it myself. All right. I will, or at least try to tonight. And if I think it's worth it, maybe then we'll go through it tomorrow. But what I'd like to do, and just starting in just a couple minutes, is this. And that is First of all, I got a bunch of junk here open that I don't know what this stuff is. All right. Okay. It's whatever this was that I accidentally opened up. So, yep. Okay. What I'd like for us to do then for the rest of the period today is to go over to here and here. All right. So far under these, we have built so far. This is not our case study. So we started, all right, with 2-1 and with 2-1. Ask me later. I don't even know what that is. With 2-1, we built that price quote app. And we did but we also, you got some practice using using the bootstrap classes. There you go. All right. From there, we went to here. Now, before this, remember, we had a test on chapters 1 and 2. Then I asked you to go back and redo that test. All right. And no, I have not graded that. What I did yesterday was I looked at everyone who had turned in written tests for chapter 6, and some people already have for chapter 7. Those have been graded. All right. Sunday is going to be a grade day. I was going to say a great day, but it's going to be a grade day. And it's going to be a great day for 2 reasons. First of all, I'm a Packers fan and they play Thursday. So I don't have to watch any football on Sunday except if I want to catch scores. All right. Second, my granddaughter who plays soccer usually on Saturdays and Sundays, this week it's Saturday only. So I plan on Sunday having everything graded through chapter 7. All right. Hopefully that'll catch everything up. So that will be, not only all of this stuff like I think I've already done the contact manager and graded that for everybody. And I think we debugged the tip calculator, and that's graded for everybody who's turned it in. So I think the only thing that you've got to do is that FAQ app. If we went through that one as a class, and we even figured out how to go in and do the attribute and non-attribute routing, both of them. All right. So this is chapter 7. Now, this is different than most of the stuff that we've done so far. What do I mean? Well, first of all, you'll notice right away that there's an area in there. And that area is called help. And that area is going to contain a controllers folder and a views folder. And I'm not going to read all of them. You can see all that stuff yourselves. All right. That's one thing. The second thing is if you go down here and look, you may or may not notice what's missing here. There's no models folder. There's no real logic in this program. That sounds weird to say to me, but there really isn't. The idea behind this program is if you bring it up and you go to the help section here, it's going to go and give you this. It'll have a tutorial. That tutorial will just have a page 1 and a page 2 and a page 3. It's not really doing anything. And the home will get you back to the page 1. All right. I believe that's what that does. So that's all that we're doing in this admin area. It's kind of silly almost. In the other one, in our main page, we're going to have in here a contact me. Okay. And you can see what's in there. So our specifications here, I'm not going to read them all to you, but they're all right there. So there's one page of specs. All right. So this is 7.1, and it's called the My Website app. So I'm going to go for about 5 more minutes to about 2:20, and then we can take another break. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a new project, and I'm going to call it my website. Let's start the way I always start. Maybe you do it this way, maybe you don't, but I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop. Then I'm going to call my website, capital M and capital Y. All right. Then I'm going to start up a new session of Visual Studio, do a new project. It'll be a model view controller project. I'll call it my website, and I will be sure to put it into the folder on my desktop also that is called my website. All right. So we've got my website being saved into my website folder, and both the project name and the solution name are my website. Next, we're still not configuring it for HTTPS. It is 7. We're going to create. Now, on this particular example, then, I'm not going to run this, but on this particular example, I'm going to close the SQL Server Object Explorer because we're not doing anything with databases. And in here, technically, I'll leave this models folder there, but we're not using it for anything. All right. But what I am going to do is I'm going to come out here where it says my website. I'm going to right mouse click on there, and I'm going to choose add. All right. And when you look in here, we got add folder, etc. I don't believe there's anything in here for an area. I believe area is just the name of a folder that we put in. So I'm going to put in here areas. All right, which as you can see moves it up to the top. All right. Then I'm going to start building what they show in here. All right. So what do they show? Well, let's take again a quick look. And under areas, I'm going to make a folder called help. Then I'm going to make 2 more folders inside of help, a controllers and a view. So let's do that. So in areas, I'm going to add another folder. Notice, oh, maybe that was it. Hold on a sec. Hold on. Let me get rid of this, because I may be mistaken. Let me get rid of that. All right, let me right mouse click on here and choose add. Nope. I thought that there was one in here possibly for area. There's not. So new folder, we're going to call this areas. All right. That is sending a message because you can have more than one area. So I'm going to right mouse click, and now I'm going to choose add area. All right. And it says, what do you want? And I believe what we want is an MVC area right here. All right. And we're told oh, I should have went through the example first myself. And I didn't. So add an MVC area, give it a name. All right. I'm going to come in here and type in help. We'll see if I'm setting this up correctly or I'm not. You'll know very quickly. All right. So what do we have in here? Well, notice what it did. Under help, we now have controllers, data, models, and views. And really the only 2 in here that we're going to use are going to be controllers and views. I probably can get rid of the other 2. For now, at least, I'll leave them there. Kind of an important point if you see this. If you look at the message here, all right, this is called scaffolding readme.txt. All right. When we set this up the way that we just did, it created a bunch of stuff for us. That's the scaffolding. If you've ever seen that where they scaffold around a building that they're creating, they kind of create a false building in front of it type of an idea. Well, there are a lot of languages out there many years ago, probably 20 years ago, if not more. I went and investigated by myself and learned a language called Ruby, R-U-B-Y. And it's still used a lot today, but it is almost a total scaffolding language. So all you do is you just keep setting up these different scaffolds, and then you have to pull out some of the stuff that's been put in there, and you have to replace it. All right, you take what's in there and you replace it with actual code. That's kind of what we're doing here. That's all I wanted to say. So I'm going to grab this endpoints.map controller route. In fact, I'm going to grab the whole thing that's in here. I don't know if I'll need it or not, but I'm going to copy this to the clipboard. And now I'm going to go into, and there's only one of these, my program.cs file. And I'm going to go down to the bottom in here. And remember that right now, app.map controller route, that's our default one. So I'm going to copy this in, but I'm not going to use all of it. I'm going to change this. Don't worry, the error should go away in a minute. I'm going to make this again an app.map controller. I'm going to remove all of this stuff. And I'm going to remove this. All right. So what we just told it right here was to add another route. All right. And you'll notice in here with the pattern starts with area exists. So it's saying basically, yes, the name is area. And if there's anything in there, there should be a home controller. That home controller should have an index in it, that it is possible for that to also take an ID. All right, hopefully everything I just said made at least, again, a little bit of sense. So I'm going to do a save all in here. All right. And then in our area, again, it started building stuff up for us already, as I mentioned. So let me close this and this. All right. So as we look in here, okay, we've got what? We've got controllers, data, models, and views. And I've already mentioned to you, the only place that we're going to need to put something in is going to be into controllers and into views. Let's do these, do our home and at least our home controller here. Let's do that one. And we'll see where we are time-wise, but otherwise we'll just take a break because this is going to be real simple. Okay, notice there's nothing in here. There is no home controller. There is nothing in these. These are all empty folders. So I'm going to right mouse click, add controller. MVC controller empty, and it will be home controller.cs. It gave it the default name. It's recognizing there is nothing in here called home controller, so we can just add it. There it is. But notice in our namespace, here we've got areas. If I go back to the controllers that's in here, you'll notice it does not say areas. Sometimes when you get too many of these and it gets confusing, that's about the only way you can tell. All right. Now, I have to put a decorator in here. All right. And that is up above this public class home controller right there. I'm going to put a decorator and it's going to say area help. So what I've just done is I've associated this controller with being inside of the help area. So again, the system will know a little bit later. That's actually all I have to do in this controller. All right, it's just the return view and it's the area help. That's it. All right, so I'm going to save this. All right, and next, I am going to see, let's see. Actually, the one for the tutorials is not big. All right, so we want to make another one. Again, going back to here, we just did this. We want to make tutorial controller, and that's only about 20 lines or so. We'll make that and then we'll take a break. All right, so I've got that one. Now I'm going to come in here and again, go to controller, go to add, go to controller, go to MVC controller empty, and we're going to call this tutorial controller.cs. All right, and I'm going to add that. And there that is. I'm going to put the same decoration on the top here. In other words, I'm going to say area help, just exactly like we did before, but we are going to add more stuff into this. All right. Now, this is going to eventually have in the views that we create, we'll create these after the break, but for the tutorial, it's going to have 3 pages. It's going to have page 1, it's going to have page 2, and it's going to have page 3. All right. So we can do this in different ways, but I'm going to do it like this. There'll be an ID in here. All right. And it'll say either page 1 or it'll say page 2 or it's going to be page 3. So I'm going to put an if statement in here. Let's start with 2. You'll see why in a second. All right. So I'm going to put in here page 2. Okay. I need my semicolon. Again, we haven't built these yet, but we will after the break. Well, we've got 3 pages. If it's not page 1 and it's not page 2, we can just say here else, and I'm going to grab this. And that'll be page 1. Oops. Sorry, we'll do it right here where it belongs. Now, it is important as we get ready to take our break here, it is important that you realize what's happening right here. This right here that we just did is in just a couple minutes is going to be, it's going to be this. So this will be page 1, as it says. This will be page 2, and this will be page 3. All right. So as it says, here's the first thing you need to know, tutorial page 1. Here's the second thing you need to know, tutorial page 2. Here's the third thing you need to know, tutorial page 3. All right. So hopefully everything I just said to you made sense. It's 2:28. Let's come back. And when we come back, we're going to write all of our view files. All right. It's like I said, it's 2:28. Let's make it 2:40 that we come back. All right. I'll see you in 12 minutes. All right, it's 2:40, so I'm going to continue on. So far we created our areas, we created our help, and we've done our controllers. All right, so I'm going to continue on by doing the views. Again, I'm going to leave the data in here. That'll become more important when we get to around chapter 10. All right, and I'm going to leave the model, or not the model, the oh, whatever other folder was there. How's that? It was models. Okay, so we've got our controllers. Now let's go down to views. Okay, there's a lot of stuff that we want to put in here. The first thing I want to do is I want to come in and add a view. It'll be a razor view empty. And this one is going to be our underscore view start dot CSHTML. All right. Again, this is garbage that's in here, so we can just get rid of it. All right. And in our view start, we have to tell it what layout we're going to be using. We haven't created that layout yet, but it'll be right here, and it'll be layout is going to be equal to underscore help layout. All right. Now, if we get an error here, we didn't, but if we got an error there, it would just be because that does not yet exist. All right, so right now that's what we've got under views is our view start. So again, I'm going to come in here and do a file save all. And the other one, if you remember that we put in here, is our view imports. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to right mouse click on here, choose add, view, razor view empty, and this one will be underscore view imports dot CSHTML. All right, and again, get rid of the garbage. And this is only 2 lines. At using tutorial, all right, and our add our tag helpers. Not sure why it's not recognizing that, but we'll fix it in just a minute. I think I know why. We don't have a folder yet called tutorial. We'll have it in a minute. All right, so that's all we need in here. All right, so right now, let me do a file save. I'm going to keep all these open so I can go back to them if I want to. But again, if you go back and look in here, now we've added these 2 files. All right. And I need a home folder and I need a shared folder and a tutorial folder. All right. So let's start. We'll start with the home folder. All right. We'll also come in and add a shared folder. And then we'll also come in and we will add a tutorial. All right. Okay. Now, none of those are populated yet, so we'll start to populate them in just a moment. But when you look in here, all right, again, if this is my kind of my template or whatever you want to call it. So now we'll have to put an index.cshtml, a help layout SHTML, and a page 1, page 2, and page 3 CSHTML. So let's put those in next. We'll leave them empty, and then we'll fill them in. So in our home, we're going to add a new view, which again will be empty, and it'll be our index.cshtml. All right, and again, I can just clear the garbage out right away. All right, then in our shared folder, I don't remember exactly what they called it, if it was the same thing or not, help layout. So underscore help layout. This would normally be our underscore layout, but we got to give it a different name. So this will be underscore help layout .cshtml. All right. And again, we can get rid of the garbage. And then finally, under our tutorial, I think it was just page 1.cshtml, page 2.cshtml, and page 3.cshtml. And indeed it is. All right. So now, to my knowledge, we now have our whole framework is set up. In fact, I'm going to try to do it like this. So we've got areas, help, controllers, and our controllers has in it, let me get that back. So our controllers has in it home and tutorial. We've got our views in home, index, shared, underscore help layout, tutorial, page 1, page 2, and page 3, our view imports, and our view start. All right. So to my knowledge, everything that's in here is now finished. This was already set up for us. So under our controllers, we've got our home controller, and under our views, I'm not going to open that, but we should have, all right, we may or may not have all these, but we'll get all that in there. All right. Okay. So let's just then continue on. I'll start with the home. Again, the order in which you do these technically isn't going to matter. And when I say start with the home, I mean the home index. All right. Now, there's not going to be a lot in most of these, just so you know. All right. So that's H1 is probably going to be too big. Let's make it an H3. That should work. That's literally everything for our index page. All right. Now, I'm going to wait for a second with the help layout, but I'm going to do the page 1, page 2, and page 3 because they're all the same almost, and they're all small. So I'm going to start with this one. Probably could have just almost copied in what we just did and made some changes. All right, so that's everything we need for page 1. The other pages are going to be similar, so I'm just going to copy this one. I'll leave that up for a second. So again, that is page 1 of 3. So let me do a file save all because I haven't saved in a bit. And let's move over to page 2. Again, I'm going to copy that in and make some changes. So this is page 2, meaning this is the second thing. And this is going to go to page 3. All right. We also here want to give the user the opportunity to go back a page. So this is the next. Whoops, sorry about that. We'll leave that one there as next, and we'll move this one. We'll make this page 1, and that'll be previous. I think they said prev on there. Okay, but this is going to allow us to move backwards or forwards. All right, let's copy this to a file, save all, and let's move to page 3. All right, and actually page 3 is more like page 1, but that's okay. All right. I'll only want one of these, and that's a previous. I can't go to next because there is no next. So I can get rid of that. This will be tutorial page 3. This will be page 3. This will be the third thing you want to know. And since I'm going backwards, this will be page 2. All right. So now I've gone in and I've created my 3 tutorial pages along with my index page. So what's left in here is going to be my help layout. All right. And yeah, I left that one till last, probably shouldn't have, but let's do a save all. And now again, just to check, there's my index. So that's done. I can close that now. There's my page 1. I'm going to close that. There's my page 2, and I'm going to close that. And there's my page 3, and I'm going to close that. All right, and I'm going to close this folder, and I'm going to close my home folder, and I've already done my view imports. All right, and I'm still not sure why that's doing that, but it is. And I've got my view start. So all that stuff is done. So let's go back and do our help layout, because like I said, that's basically the help layout is all that's left. Not real long, about 20 lines or so. Now we're gonna have to go over this, so if you'll hold on for just a second, we will go over all of it. Okay. All right, let's see. In fact, it's wrong. Let me move this over a bit. So what we're doing here, what we're doing in here is we're using the view context and we're asking it or querying it for information to let us know what controller is currently our active controller. All right. Because we want to be able to show in here which layout are we going to show? Are we going to show the help layout or are we going to show our main layout? All right. And all that you'll notice was inside of the beginning. Now we're going to put in some stuff. On 6 or 7 more lines. Hmm. I like putting these over multiple lines. Just think it's easier to read. And we want this to say tutorial. All right, so again, this is our layout. This is the layout for help. All right. And what we're saying basically is what, as far as what's in here, all right, if we're going to go home, we want to go home and we want it to be part of the help. So we want it to go to the help home index. All right. That's what that link is going to be for. The link for tutorial is going to take us to help tutorial index. And the ID, so what it'll ferret through is it'll bring up page 1. All right, there's one more line we need to put in here, and that is to render our body. So that may have made sense. That may not have made any sense. So what we're doing in here is we're saying layout is equal to the layout. In here, we're trying to figure out which controller is our active controller. All right. We're in our layout for our area. So it's got to be either the home controller in our help area, or it's the tutorial controller in our help area. So we're letting the system know which one it is. All right. Then we're setting up a couple links so that we're able to kind of, for lack of better words, we're able to go back and forth between them. All right, so we created our view start. We created our view imports. We created our index for home. We created our help layout CSHTML. We did our page 1. We did our page 2. We did our page 3. All right. So now we get to go back and do the other stuff. So in other words, let's look at this once. So let me do a file, save all. All right. And I don't know if we still have that error that we had over there before. We do. So let's see. It says the type or namespace. Okay, that should be the namespace. So we call this my website. So I think that's what that should be. All right. So please make that change to my website, my error. And that is in our view imports. All right, so I'm going to do a file, save all on this. And I'm just going to close everything. I'm going to look at it quickly. That I'm not worried about. I think that's going to be all right. It says it's possible no. All right, so I suppose I could come in and do this. All right, but I don't want to do that anyway. So file, save all right here. It's not showing me any red, so there are no errors. This was our view imports, which now is correct with my website. And we added the tag helper. All right. This was our home controller. This is our home controller, our main home controller. This is the home controller in our help area. So we can close that. This is our tutorial controller in our help area. So we can close that. And this is our view start in there. Now, we don't have much to go, but we do have to work on our home controller here, etc. I don't know if we can run it right now or not, but it never hurts to try. So I'm going to see if it's going to give me any errors. Okay. Right now, it's not showing us the area because we haven't changed that. All right. So right now, it's not, doesn't do much. Go to home and we can go to privacy. All right. All right. But let's go in and let's start working on this then. So let's begin with our home controller. That's right here. All right. As we typically do, we're going to come in and we're going to remove this for those diagnostics. We're going to remove all the logger stuff. We're going to remove all the privacy stuff. I mean, you could leave the privacy stuff in here. I don't have a reason for doing that, but we could do that if we wanted to. All right. So index is going to return view. That's okay. But there's still another thing that we have to do in here. What do I mean? If you look in here, wrong page. All right. We've now got basically, we've got most of this should be done. All right. Most of this should be done and this. So we're back to here. So we have to make this. It looks like we need a home page, an about page, and a contact. Those aren't, so those are going to end up being views eventually. All right. But in our controller, we're going to need at least, so home is going to be the one we already did, but we're going to need about and we're going to need contact. All right. So let's put those in. Now we're just going to have a little bit of text that we'll put in later. Whoops, got to give that a name. That'll be about. And again, we're just going to come in here and we're going to return view. It's like that. All right, so that's the first two. Finally, we've got the other one, contact, and this has got a few things because we're basically setting some stuff in here. So again, an iAction result, contact, and again, about 4 or 5 lines in here. There's different ways that we can set this up. I'm going to make a dictionary. All right. And what a dictionary is basically it's going to be a set of things that are going to have a key and a value. We'll have a key called phone and then a phone number. We'll have a key called email and then an email address. We'll have a key called Facebook and then a Facebook address. All right. So not really a whole heck of a lot in here. All right. And these are both going to be strings. And don't worry, if it gives me any errors, I think they're going to clear themselves up pretty quickly. And the way you set that up is like this. So phone, that's the key. Phone number, I'll just put mine in there. It doesn't matter. Put whatever you want to put in there. Doesn't really matter. All right, next. All right, we're going to have the email. And again, I'll put in my email. All right, and then finally, we have Facebook. No, I'm not going to put in my Facebook stuff. We'll just use whatever they put in the book here. This is just showing stuff anyway. You know, it's not like this is anything that big. And finally, we need the semicolon here, but we're still getting an error because we're not returning anything. Well, what we want to return is the view, and we want to pass those contacts into it. All right. So that right there, that is everything that we need. All right. For our home controller. So for the index and for the about, it's just returning the view. And for contact, we are setting up a new dictionary item in here that we're returning. Okay. All right. So now what's left to do is to come back in here into our views, and under home, we've got index and we've got privacy. All right. Okay. So we will do the index one in just a moment. We'll do that first because it's nice and small. So the index.cshtml, I don't like any of this. We'll leave homepage, or we can put, I think they put my website in there, but it's something like that. All right, I'm going to get rid of all this stuff. This is that garbage that comes up in your homepage. And we'll put in here section, header, and in H1 that says, welcome to my website. You can customize this any way you want. And you came to visit. And that's it. That's it for our home. All right, but we still need our about and our contact. All right, well, the about's not going to be much bigger. I'm just going to copy this. All right, and I'm going to change the name of privacy to about. So I'm going to right mouse. In fact, let's just get rid of it. I'm going to delete the privacy one. It's gone. Good. And now I'm going to go under home and I'm going to add a view, a razor view empty. And this one will be then about dot cshtml. Again, there's garbage in here. Okay, I brought this back and this will be about my website. We'll have the section header. It'll be an H1, but this will say about my website. All right. And we'll just say, I hope you enjoy my website. I don't really care. I'm making this text up. I don't know exactly what they said in the text. So we've now got index and we've got home. But the next thing that we have to put in there is we got to add another one in here, and that's contact. Let's again grab this, Control A, Control C. And under home, let's add another view. That will be another Razor view empty. And it will be contact.cshtml. Again, get rid of the junk and paste this in. All right. Now this, we need to somehow let this refer to the information in our contact. So we've been using @model, but we don't really have a model in here right now, at least where we're doing anything. But we can do this. @model dictionary. And that dictionary we created had a string and a string. Again, whoops. The one string was for the key and the other string was for the value. So the title on this one will be Contact Me. Again, we will change what's in here to Contact Me. All right. And then what we're creating right now, just so you see it, is this thing right here. So looks to me like this is a table. It's not striped or anything. We could zebra stripe it if we wanted to. It's a table. We could border it too. Since we've been doing that, I'm going to. So class equal table bordered, table striped. Again, if you don't like the way that looks, you could always just remove that too. All right. And then we're going to print everything out. So for each value pair, string, pair, we call that whatever we want, in our model. And here's just where we're going to print that stuff out. All right. So we're telling it to iterate through. And what we want in here is first, we want to print the key. And then we want to print the value. All right. And that's everything for this. Okay. So what's left? Well, we need to do our layout. We'll do that in just a moment. All right. So I'm going to do a file, save all. And if you're still typing it in, you can. All right. And continue. We've got our view start. That already should be set to just underscore layout. So that's okay. That one we already got then. All right. We've got we don't have to do anything to our app settings.json file because there's no database in here. So we don't need to worry about that. All right. And we've already gone in to our program file here, and we already added the areas route. Okay. So the only thing I believe that we still have to do in here is under shared. All right. We have to go in and we have to add our underscore layout. All right. So I think this is going to take a little bit of work, but not a boatload. All right. The first thing that we have to do in here is kind of similar to what we did earlier. And if you say, I don't know what you mean, well, remember when we were in here, when we were in our layout that was in here, we put this stuff in there right here. is active nav. I'm going to copy that. All right, I'm going to copy that. In fact, I don't need the layout part, but so I'm going to copy that. And now I'm going to close a couple things here because it just gets too confusing with too much stuff open. All right, so up at the top here, I'm going to replicate that. Now I'm going to get an error when I do it, so I have to surround it in here. All right, now this isn't perfect, but I got to look at it. Let's see, active nav, string. Well, we need to know a couple things. This is where it gets a little bit confusing. Remember explaining this last semester and people got confused. And I'm going to say string action, string area equal null. And that's important because we're not working right now with the area controller. All right. So I'm going to keep this last line that's in here, and I'm going to change this. So we'll have 3 lines. All right. So string current action. We again have got to say equal view context dot route data dot values action dot to string. All right. Now, I'm not sure why I'm getting all those underscores. We'll look at it in a minute. All right. I also need string current area equals, again, the same kind of stuff that we put in here. But now it's going to be area right? And now this is return action equal current action ampersand area equal current area. All right. Now I want to check these out. Let's see. Active nav is declared but never used. It will be. All right. Possible null reference. So we probably, I have to play with it a little bit, but somewhere in here we could put question marks. Maybe here, probably here, and here. But it still looks like it doesn't like it. So since it didn't fix that error for that warning, I'll just remove them. All right, like that. All right, so now I want to come in. Well, let's look at this. All right, we're trying to figure out what our nav bar should be. All right, and now we don't have an area. All right, but we need to figure out the action. So we're using view context to find out our current action, and we're using view context to find out our current area. That should just be null. All right, and then we're returning. The idea behind all this junk that you see here is ideally whatever is active is going to be highlighted. It'll be like in a little bit of a whitish color. So let's look in here now. Our doc type is fine. HTML head, meta is fine, meta. Okay, we've got view. We can use view data, probably would work. I'm going to use a view bag dot title here. All right. And we can leave the my website in there, doesn't matter at all. Linking in our bootstrap, linking in our local files. All right, that looks okay. All right, let's go down to our body. All right. And I'm going to keep most of this, if not all of it, but that this header that's right here, I'm going to actually move that down to the bottom. You'll see why in just a second. Okay, so there's the header. And we'll fill that in a minute, but I want to look in here. I want this to be in a div with a class of container. All right, and I want that div to go all the way down to where our header is. So down to here, like that. All right, now I want to look at this and see what we have to change. All right. Well, you already know, for example, in here, we don't have privacy anymore. So we're going to have to change some of this stuff. All right, but let's take a look at it from the top here. Nav bar, expand, etc. This nav that's in here, for lack of better words, is kind of a cluster. We're going to have to rewrite it. So I'm going to get rid of it and recreate it. All right, so in here now, we want to put in a nav. Okay, then underneath that, we're going to have our header. And underneath that, we're going to have this with our role equal main and render the body. That's good. And for our footer here, we don't have privacy anymore. We remove that. So I'm getting rid of that. And I don't think we're using any jQuery in here, so we can get rid of all this. All right, so our footer's done. Let's quickly do the header, and then our container's done. All we have to fix then is our nav bar. All right, so in here, give it some margin bottom. Now this is where we made that thing. If you remember, we created a section that was called header. So we're going to render here that section. And what that will do is, depending upon what is active, all right, it'll words. All right. Now, let's see. I said we're going to put this whole thing in a div, and we're going to call that div, or give it a class of container. I want to put everything in there. Like that. So I'm going to move this all over. Put a line break in here so you can see what's what. Another line break here. And there's our footer. All right, so we need our nav bar in here. And I think that's about the only thing we have left. That's the good news. The bad news is there's probably about 20 lines we have to type in here. And knowing me and typing 20 lines, I'm hoping I can type them all without screwing them up. All right. That's the first part. And inside of this nav, we need to put in another nav. So about 12 more lines or so, and we'll be finished. All right, I'm going to take this and copy it. So I've got 3 of these in here because I need a home, an about, and a contact. There's my home. Now I got to move this one over. And if it makes it easier to read, I can line break in here. Somehow I lost my ending div here, so let's put that in. And I lost it here as well. All right, so those 2 are done. And then I've got my last one here. Let me move that over. And that one is going to be help. Index, about, and contact. Action will be contact, still the home controller, and that's contact. All right, move these over. There. And finish this up. This will be way off to the right. And this is, whoops, this is going to be our link to actually bring up the help. That's it. Hopefully you're somewhat, with me here as far as you're not too far behind or whatever. All right. But it's getting late. It's 3:34, so we'll go over this tomorrow. But I do want to, before we leave, try it and see if it works or not. Are you pretty much caught up? Are you there, Grant? Either I lost you or your voice isn't showing. So let me save this and we'll run it and see what happens. And there could very well could be errors in here. All right, welcome to my website. There's home. There's about. There's contact. Well, that's screwed up. But this looks okay. And help. The page. There's page 1. There's page 2. I can go back to page 1. Next should give me page 3. So everything's working except that should be moved over to the right. So that isn't working. And on my contact, that is wrong. Everything else is working, which in itself is fairly incredible. So let's go back to the contact page. All right, I want to contact .cshtml. I think that's actually okay. I think the problem is in my controller. So let me close everything in area here. Let me open up the home controller and let's go back and look at the contact here. All right. So public IAction result contact. Var contacts equal new dictionary string. Oh, that actually looks correct. So let's look at the U for contact. Okay. I didn't put an @ sign here. So that'll be screwed up. All right. The header table for each DR. I think that might be the only thing that was wrong. Let's try it again. There we go. So we can now go home, about, contact, go to help, and in help, we can go to the tutorial page 1. We can go to page 2 or back to page 1. From page 2, we can also go to page 3, or we can go back to page 2. All right. So virtually everything that's in here is working. All right. It may not be fantastic. I probably would want to tweak some of the stuff that's in here a little bit. All right. Grant, I don't know if you're still following me or if you're on or you're not on, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it a period because we're like 10 minutes away from regularly ending anyway. I'm going to go over this tomorrow and bring it back up again. We'll do that for approximately the first half hour or so. Then I plan on giving you your test and we will go over everything that you're supposed to do. I'm hoping to write the test tonight. All right. So hopefully, again, all that made sense. It shows me that you're still here. But if you are, either your mic's off or you're not answering me. Either way, it is what it is. So I'm going to stop right now and I will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good day.